Welcome to Unplanned and Untold, a podcast that dives into the real life, unexpected twists of facing an unplanned pregnancy in college. Join us as we listen to the unplanned and untold stories of those who have overcome the odds in order to achieve their goals. Welcome back to another episode of Unplanned and Untold. I'm your host, Caitlin Willing, and today our listeners have a special treat. I will be interviewing Susie Fox today, and Susie and I actually went to high school together, so we go way back. I haven't seen you in 16, 17 years.
Yeah, probably since freshman year of high school. That was, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I feel so old being able to say I haven't seen somebody in that long.
Yeah, I know. It's a little weird.
Oh my gosh. Well, take me back in time, Susie, because your story is a little bit different than some of the other interviewees that we've had. So take me back to your childhood and where did you grow up, and just tell me what life was like as a child.
Yeah, so I grew up in South Florida. My childhood was not your typical, whatever that means. Little rocky. Both of my parents had addiction issues, and so we moved around a lot. I think some key players in my story, important people, were my aunt and uncle.
Wow.
We kind of landed with them a lot, several times in our lives. So they were always kind of like the fallback for us.
Yes.
You know, they kind of caught us.
Sure.
So super grateful for them. And that was my dad's sister and her husband. Still pretty close with them.
Did they have children, or was it just, yeah, they did as well. So you kind of got grafted into the family.
Yep. Yeah. And they were super close our whole lives. I actually just went to Disney with them recently. So they're still an important part of my life. And you'll hear me probably say we. I'm referring to me and my sister. So my sister and I, so my mom had 4 kids, and my sister and I were the youngest 2, and we share the same dad. So my sister and I were kind of always together until high school. We kind of split up a little bit, but so she's always been with me. She's still with me today.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. So we went to the same high school, obviously. How did you land at St. Thomas Aquinas?
So my dad was, like I said, struggled with some addiction issues, and we were in an unsafe environment. And my aunt and uncle had taken us in again for second time, I think.
Wow.
So I moved in with them, my sister and I, when I was in 7th grade. So 7th and 8th grade, I went to St. David in Fort Lauderdale, and then went to St. Thomas. That was where my cousins had gone. So my aunt was a Catholic school teacher. She just recently retired, but she taught at St. David, and then her girls went to St. Thomas. So it was just kind of, the schools filter in, right?
Yes, that makes sense.
So that's how I landed at St. Thomas. And then at the end of my freshman year, I decided that I wanted to move in with my mom, and I had never lived with my mom full time before, to be honest.
Oh, so totally new experience.
It was, yeah. And she always still struggles, to be honest, with alcoholism. And but I think I craved normalcy at that point. I mean, like any child did. This is kind of funny, but as a kid at birthdays, I remember like blowing out my candles, and I always wished for these 2 very different things. I wished for a pet monkey, and and I wished to have a normal family. And I still remember that.
Yeah.
So I think like this was my shot at normalcy, right? So I moved in with my mom after freshman year, and that's when I left St. Thomas. So I moved back to Key Largo, which is where I'm originally from.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's where I met.
What was it like living with her in Key Largo?
It was interesting. She had never really had her kids full time either.
Sure. It's a lot.
Yeah.
What a change.
Yeah. And hormonal teenage girl. And I had a lot of emotional baggage, to be honest, with the stuff that, I had kind of carried throughout childhood.
Yeah.
So I'm generally a pretty easy person. I was a pretty easy kid, but I think she and I just butted heads because I was rebelling and I was angry and all these things. So it was an interesting dynamic. And I don't think she was never really like the parent. She was more like the friend.
Right.
So I had a lot more freedom there than I ever did before. And then, you know, things transpired.
Sure. And you meet a guy in Key Largo?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Walk me through that. Walk me through, were y'all in a relationship? How did things kind of evolve over time until boom, you find out you're pregnant?
Yeah. So I had moved there, started sophomore year of high school, and I met him in January. So when I was 15, and I had met him in January, and we had been dating for probably about 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah, probably about 4 months. And he was 2 years older than I was.
Okay.
And so I turned 16 in April. And then in May, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh my gosh. So you were just turned 16.
End of sophomore year.
In a new environment for the most part, figuring out life with your mom for the first time. And now we're adding this on top of everything else. And so what was your initial reaction when you find out, holy crap, I'm still in high school and now I'm pregnant?
I think that's a hard reaction to describe. I mean, scary, but also I was very responsible in a lot of ways. And it might not sound like that, you know, the way I talk, but I was very responsible, I think, for myself. And there wasn't a point where it was like, oh my gosh, panic, what am I going to do? It was like, well, this is what it is.
Wow.
And yeah, I remember calling, I think the first person I told was actually my best friend. I called her from the bathroom with the test and told her. And then I told him.
Okay. And how did he react?
He was happy as far as I can remember.
Sure.
Like he wasn't upset. And
okay.
You know, I think that this isn't something that I don't think was conscious for either of us at the time, but I think that for both of us, it probably felt like a chance to make our own family that we never had.
Absolutely. Right? Almost like a reset button of, I want to do this right. And this is going to motivate me. You almost see it as a beautiful opportunity to change the legacy of your newfound family. I can totally relate to that. Yeah. So he's okay with it. Your best friend is, you know, supportive, but now you've got to tell your mom, where was her head at with all I can only imagine, just living with your teenager for the first time. And then this news, was she shocked?
So I remember this vividly. I was working as a hostess at a restaurant, and I always loved to work. Like as soon as I was, I think 11 or 12, I was babysitting. You know, I always liked to make my own money, and probably again subconsciously that came from wanting stability and independence.
Being independent. Yes, it's almost like you had to learn at a young age that you could only rely on you, and it sounds like you've really made choices that created stability in your own way, like control in your own aspect of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. You nailed it. So she was driving me to work, and in Key Largo, it's just, there's two lanes. There's a north and a south, one in, one out. Like that's it. And so we were driving north, and we had to cross the southbound traffic to pull into my work. And I remember she was complaining that I was working too much, and you're still in school and you're working too much and you need to work less and you need to prioritize school and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, it's not like you have a family to support. And as she says that, I got real quiet, because I had known, I think, for probably a couple of weeks at that point.
Oh my God.
And
now's the time.
Yeah. So then she's like, turns to pull across the traffic, and she looks at me at the same time, and she just knew. And it was like silence, and we just kind of coasted across the traffic. And I remember looking to make sure like we were good.
Oh my God. She just locked eyes with you.
Yeah.
While she's driving.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my word.
So I still remember like the parking spot we pulled in and everything. And it was like this rock parking lot right on the water, you know. So we pull in and coast into this spot, and she starts crying, and she's like, you know, sorry, I'm getting like shaky. Wasn't expecting that. She started telling me, I just want you to know you have choices. And she's like, my mom fought for you to have choices, for us to have choices. And her mom, who is actually, I was named after her.
Yeah.
Very interesting backstory there. So her mom, actually, she was a women's activist in Florida, and she was like very into meditation and activism, and just a really incredible woman. And she actually had a child when she was, I think, 16 or 17. And this was back in, I don't know, had to be like 50s, maybe.
Right. Sure.
40s, 50s.
Yeah.
Things were different then. And her child was taken away from her. And it was taken away. There was no choice. She had to have that baby, and it was removed. So like, can you imagine? Right?
No, the trauma that like probably was also spoken to your mother about having an unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah. Absolutely. So anyway, that's a whole other conversation on healing your lineage, right? But so she's like, you have choices, but I had already chosen, there was no, even at barely 16 years old, there was never, there was no other option for me. That's just, I knew.
Absolutely.
I was going to bring this child into the world, and I told her that. And she was scared for me, for sure. She was scared. And then it kind of evolved over time, and it was like this push toward independence, and like, this is your choice. That's your choice, but you're going to have to step up. And I had to figure out the system and how I was going to navigate it with a child and all of those things. So,
wow. How do you feel like society embraced you or didn't embrace you being so young, pregnant, or even with an infant?
I felt very isolated. I think there's definitely, if there's stigma when you're in college, there's like definitely a lot of stigma when you're in high school. But I decided to homeschool and finish high school on my own. So I did that through like a private program. So I homeschooled myself. And it really, all my friends kept living their high school life. And so I became separate from that. But I also didn't really fit in with like parents either, because they were older. So even to this day, I've gotten over most of that, and most of like the shame surrounding it and the stigma and all of that. But I went to a wedding recently, the end of last year, with people that we both know, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there was some little remarks made kind of that were, I realized like, it's still a thing that's
still there
about.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
That's so weird to me.
It is. It's wild. What's really crazy is because when you don't know the full story, people start filling it in. And I even remember with your story in high school, I remember not seeing you. Like, I didn't know you, but I remember you didn't come back. And then later on, you had a baby. And so all of us thought she left because she got pregnant in a Catholic high school. That's that all of us had thought this entire time.
I didn't know that.
You weren't the only one. There was also another girl in our grade, but the same thing. We knew it happened to her because she actually was in school with that pregnant belly. And then when that baby came, she didn't come back.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because those type of stories, when you don't know, you fill in these gaps, and they can be so incorrect and so judgmental on so many levels.
Yeah.
And that stigma, like it does stick around. I'll tell you, I didn't go to our high school reunion because I was fresh, into this world of having a baby out of wedlock and the friend requests and people just snooping. I didn't want to have to answer their questions at our high school reunion, to be honest, because I just wasn't confident in it. And it's taken me many years of being confident and healing from all of that, because it's traumatic. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot. And so tell me, you finish high school. What were your dreams or aspirations? Did you know you wanted to go to college?
it's funny how this has evolved over time because um, when I was little, I always thought I would be a doctor or a nurse.
Okay.
And then after I had my son, it was like, I think I kind of dumbed those dreams down a little bit. I kind of turned it down and was like,
Okay.
oh, I'll go to a tech school or something, maybe be a medical assistant. And, that is what it is.
Right.
So we moved. Okay. So I'm going to tell you part of the story I left out here. So after I had my son, or actually when I was pregnant, my mom had decided that she wanted to move to Tennessee. So here I had just moved in with her, and I was home and normal life, boyfriend, madly in love, all of these things. And then she wanted to uproot me and move to the middle of nowhere in Tennessee. So, I didn't do that.
Right. How do you, especially with the father of your baby, y'all are trying to work this out and you're just supposed to up and move. You're already so isolated.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So we moved in with his mom, who I still have a great relationship with. Awesome. And then we ended up moving to North Florida. And when my son was about two, I decided to go back to work. I had finished my high school diploma by that time. And so I got a job at an assisted living facility, and I kind of moved my way up into the management position. So I think by 20, I was managing this facility, and I was also in school, in college at this time.
Yeah.
For my associate's degree, with the goal eventually to be in nursing school.
Okay.
But nursing school was always kind of unattainable because it requires long clinical hours. Mm-hmm. And to be a full-time single working parent and to be able to do that was just not realistic for me, which is why I think baby steps is so important. I have to throw that in there because I'll go through the rest of my journey here in a minute, but it took me a long time to get where I'm at, to gain the stability that I have today. That was so important to me. So I guess I skipped a little bit. So my son's dad and I didn't work out. We were on and off for several years, and I hadn't gotten my associate's degree yet. I was still in school. I was working full time, and then my dad got really sick. Okay, and I decided to move back to South Florida. All right. And be closer to him. So he was in liver failure. And this was kind of my son's dad and I had gotten back together, and we decided to move back to South Florida together, to Key Largo. And I was going to start back at school and find a job and all of those things. And within days, 3 days, I think, I had spent all my savings to get a house, and I left my job. I had been out for 4 years, and I was, a manager there and all of these things, and left my college that I was at. And within 3 days, it was very clear that it wasn't going to work out.
Crumbling. Yeah.
And so that was the final, we're done. If we're done now, we're done, And if we're being honest, I think both of us knew that we were never going to work. We were so young, and we were
such babies,
just babies. And we were just both clinging on to this idea of having a family, and we just have to make it work, and we have to make it work. But we are totally different people. Yes. And it was never going to work. Right. So I left with nothing, me and my son, and I was like, what do we do? What do we do? And Caitlin, if there's a point where you just fall on your knees and surrender, that was it.
That was rock bottom for you. Of I have nowhere to turn. So who do you go to in that moment?
My aunt and uncle.
Back to your roots, back to what you know.
I'm getting teary-eyed.
Oh.
Yeah. Because I remember sitting in my car and just having that moment of like, oh, I worked so hard for everything, right? I proved that I could do it. I proved I could go to college, and I proved I could work full time, and I proved everything.
Yeah.
And now I have to just give it all up. The family that I worked for, and everything. And so I called my aunt and uncle and I said, I need help.
Yeah.
And no questions asked. They were like, our door's always open. So I ended up back in Fort Lauderdale. Where I started, and where, where we ended up so many times. Yeah. And it was just, God, I just felt my life was crumbling. And and I felt like I failed more than anything else, Little did I know that was the breakdown that would have led me to where I am today. Couldn't tell me that at the time, but
I feel like there's always this big breakdown before there's breakthrough. I always say that when you're at your lowest, you are at the edge of breaking through. If you can just keep moving forward.
It's so true. It's just so true. And you have to have the courage, right? Just
you do.
Courage.
Yep.
And I think that as like young moms and young single moms, if you have nothing else, you have to have courage.
Yes.
And that's what makes us so powerful, right?
It's so true. There's something about another young mom, student mom, however you want to slice it, that you just have this automatic respect and underlying relationship with, even if you don't know them really well, because you know what they're made of. You know the grit that's inside of them and how fierce they can be to provide a better life for their child. And it's such an honor to speak with women like you and to share these stories of triumph so that other women who are in that breakdown mode can see, girlfriend, like you pull your bootstraps back up and you just keep going and you keep pressing on because there's something really special in you that's going to help you, move forward.
That's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
So how did your aunt and uncle react? They said, come back in. Like, were they helpful in any capacity other than housing?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was challenging for everyone. I moved there and my son was starting kindergarten that week. So I moved to their house like with nothing. And my 6 or 7 year old, and I guess he would have been 5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah.
And enrolled him in kindergarten that week. And he was a challenging kid. He's mellowed out a lot, but he was a very challenging kid. So, but yeah, they were so supportive. And I ended up being there for almost 2 years.
Okay.
And I finished my AA while I was there at Broward College. Nice. And so that was a big step. But still, these days an AA isn't enough to get you.
Right. You got to keep going.
And so I dabbled in some other stuff, speech language pathology, which was cool. And I kind of dabbled, but with everything, it always just came to that point of like, well, I'm going to have to do some kind of clinical experience.
Right.
How do I do that? So, another big turning point. Well, my dad passed away that November. Okay. So part of my decision with moving back in with my aunt was that I would be close to my dad to help out. Yeah. But he did not make it. So he passed in November, and I really just and then I totaled my car in December of that year. And it was just rock bottom. Felt like it was getting
after
deeper.
Another.
Yeah, totally. So then that following summer, I remember going to my grandma's house. It was in Delray, just like 45 minutes away. And I was laying in my dad's bed after he passed, because he lived with my grandmother before he passed. And I was just laying there, and I was just had this moment of, it was kind of like this moment of peace that came over me that was like, hey, you're not gonna ever be satisfied until you learn to live with and to love yourself.
Sure. Yep.
And you need to get out of here for a minute.
Yeah.
And so that was the first summer that my son went to stay with his dad. And so I had time with myself, which is the first time I ever had time with myself.
Yeah.
I mean,
crazy.
It's a thing, you know, from when you live this chaotic childhood and then you have your child so young and like you just never breathe.
You've never processed it. And I feel like I can relate 100% because especially with an unplanned pregnancy, a lot of times that unplanned pregnancy is a result of trauma from your childhood. You know, it just leads to decisions where you end up in that spot. So then the child, you know, is brought into the picture and you've still not healed from all the things that, you know, brought you down that road of that unplanned pregnancy. And you're just treading water with a baby, trying to be the best you, and you don't even know yourself.
Yes, that's so true.
Wow.
It's like you're how do you survive? How do you thrive when you're just trying to figure out how to survive every day, right?
Exactly.
And you want to break that cycle.
Yes.
Yeah. So I had that moment and I was like, you need to get out of here for a minute. You know, I'd never really done anything, traveled on my own or anything. And so I was talking to my uncle who lived in Colorado, where I live now. And he was helping me arrange flights to actually go see my mom in Tennessee just to get away. And while I was talking to him, he was like, yeah, you should come check out Colorado sometime. And so I said, well, what if I just come to Colorado after I go to Tennessee? Like, I'll just, you know, make it a trip. And so I did. And I met his roommate at the time, my uncle's roommate. I feel like when I say that, it sounds like my uncle's roommate's like 65.
Right.
But he's not. Just to clarify.
He's not this old man for everyone to know.
No, he's not. He's older than me, but 11 years, he's not 65.
Much. Yeah.
So I came to Colorado. I honestly just fell in love with Colorado. We went camping.
It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And camping was like a spiritual experience for me. And just sleeping next to the river. And it was just magical. And the people and the vibration here. And I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
And then I met my now partner of almost 10 years actually this week. I know.
Congratulations.
Thanks. It's crazy. And I just knew this is where I needed to be.
This is your break.
Yeah. So I went back home to South Florida and I decided that I was going to move here.
Wow.
And my family thought I was insane. I'm sure they thought I was insane because who moves across the country knowing like what my uncle, like no one else, and with their 7-year-old child, like who does that? That's crazy.
Right.
But I did. I moved here a year later, and my sister actually decided to come with me. She was bartending in Tallahassee, and she was like, well, I don't really have much else going on. Like, let's do it. So she moved here too.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you're still in school right now. Is that right? You're back at it. You're back at it, girl.
So I moved here and I started working at a medical practice, and I worked my way up there into a leadership, and I was there for about 4 years, and I was just like, you know, this isn't it. And do you ever get those little, I'm sure you do, when your higher power speaks to you and you're like, oh, okay, I hear you.
It clicks.
I hear you. Yep. Yeah. And I was talking to a patient on the phone, and I'm kind of educating them on why they need to come in. And I was like, this is what I like. I like talking to people and like problem solving. I'm good at leadership too. But also that's not what fills my cup. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give it a shot. I'll apply to nursing school. And I got in, and and so I graduated nursing school in 2020, like May of 2020. So that's awesome. Pandemic. And
oh my gosh, but you did it after all these years. You beat the odds. You friggin' beat the odds and got your degree.
I did. And I did my associates and my bachelor's as like dual, like both. I did 2 programs at the same time just to get it done. And, so I started working, I just went straight into the ICU, right into the fire, straight out of nursing school in the pandemic. It was great.
Oh my gosh.
And I just feel like I came to another crossroads recently where I was like, I think I'm gonna go back to school again. I never thought I would, but yeah, so I'm in nurse practitioner school now in grad school, and I own a small construction company, and my partner is our general contractor.
Wow.
And so it just all works out.
It panned out.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, if you could go back in time and talk to, 16-year-old Susie, who's finding out she's pregnant, knowing the challenges that you would face, it wasn't going to be perfect, but what advice would you give to that young girl?
I would say, don't dumb down your dreams.
Okay. I love that.
Don't mute your dreams for anyone else, because what I think that there is this conscious or subconscious belief that where we come from kind of defines us.
Sure.
And if you were born into certain circumstances, then you just kind of have to live in that.
Right.
And that's just not true. Like, there's none of us that were put here to be anything less than our highest version of ourselves,
Absolutely.
And I really believe that we were given these bodies, these vessels. We're not just balls of light, right? We have these vessels to come into this world and do something, and to love, and to connect, and to serve through love and connection, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say, don't dumb down your dreams, and also follow your intuition, because it can be really hard, especially like we were saying, when you're a young mom, a single mom, when you never have time with yourself to really tune in and to know you. But it's important to do that, because that living in alignment is everything. That's why we're here. Right.
You've got to take the time to heal. You've got to take the time to go back. And I feel like a lot of these podcasts, a very common theme is women are actually going back and reliving a lot of this, and they never have before. And it pulls back all these emotions. And you're like, okay, I may need to revisit this and see, am I healed from this? Am I cool? Are we good?
Absolutely.
Because it's a lot to process. And sometimes you go into survival mode. And you stick your feelings in a box, and you put this little human being first, because you've got to.
You have to. Yeah.
You have to, but we've got to take care of ourselves. And that advice is so beautiful. Seriously, thank you so much for sharing your full journey with us and inspiring us. And I don't know, girl, like, there's just something about you. You're a freaking rock star to even go back to school, to be a nurse practitioner. Like, you defy the odds, and you're such an inspiration. Could never go back, especially with kids. But it's so cool to see that you have not let that stop you. Like, that is your dream, and you're going for it. And it's really, really awesome to just be in your circle and to hear your story.
Oh, thank you. I admire you so much too, in your journey and what you're doing. I think it's so important, because our stories don't define us, I don't believe, but they connect us, and they allow us to relate and know that we're not alone, and I think everybody should know that, whether your listeners are moms facing this journey, or if it's, people who want to support baby steps, they should know that these moms are some of the most motivated, driven, just so much grit behind them. And they will walk into a room and command just by their energy, because they get so good at surviving that all they can do is thrive from there,
Exactly.
So I think everyone should know that.
Absolutely. I mean, if we can just give them a leg up, with our stories, there was no such thing as baby steps. And we had to really face things alone and swim upstream, essentially. And so if we can provide a baby steps across the nation at different universities to just give these women a leg up, give them a chance and a shot to achieve their dreams and their goals, and to not feel like it's going to take them forever or they have to turn in their goals for their baby. I mean, it really impacts not only that student mom, but we're talking generations, girl. Like your children will be impacted by your decision to push forward, to graduate, you know, to go back to school. I mean, you're affecting lineages at this point by the decisions that we make. And so that's our hope. That's our hope, is to really empower these young moms to not feel like they're just surviving, but to truly thrive, like you said.
Yes, I love that so much. And I just love and appreciate you and everything you're doing. And I'm so proud of you. And thanks for making your journey, you know, allowing it to heal other people. It's so important.
Thank you. And thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in. We hope to have you back in 2 weeks for another episode of Unplanned and Untold. Bye-bye. As we all know, life doesn't always go as planned. And if you or someone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy in college, visit babysteps.org for more resources. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, embrace the unexpected.